Hello, everyone. We're just going to wait a little bit for people to get into the Zoom, and then we'll get started. All right, it's a little after 10:30, so I wanted to get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lindsay Hallen from Envision Consulting. We are a consulting firm that works with nonprofits on strategy and search. Thank you for being with us today. We are here to discuss envisioning your future. This webinar is for those that have been laid off due to the unfortunate circumstances of COVID-19. We've got a lot of great tips for you today in applying for jobs right now. We will have a Q&A session at the very end, but feel free to put your questions in the chat and I'll go through those. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sean. He is a recruiter at Envision Consulting, and he's going to be leading us through everything today.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, like Lindsay said, I've been a recruiter for 5 years, a little over 5 years. I've recruited in a bunch of different industries. And right now I've been recruiting in nonprofit for about a year now. So the whole point of this webinar is to kind of help those who are kind of maybe confused or feel unsure about where they stand in their job. Maybe they anticipate a layoff or a furlough, and just to give you guys tips of how to interview, what kind of sets you up for success based on your application. So that's kind of what we want to go over a little bit here. I know we have some fun little graphics kind of show emotions right now. So I know there's probably a wide range of how people are feeling, especially right now. So without further ado, I want to go to the next slide and start kind of going over an overview of what we'll be talking about today. So main focus for today is we're going to go over some resumes, do's and don'ts, building a LinkedIn profile to kind of stand out, how to answer the interviewer's questions. And one way to do that is the STAR method. So we're going to go over that briefly too. And then also to kind of wrap things up, interview appreciations and pet peeves, and where to look for new opportunities. Awesome. So for some resume do's, I know it may seem obvious, but have a professional layout. There's lots of times when things just seem very unorganized and kind of just more cluttered than in a nice, professional, organized, detailed manner on the resume. So there'll be like blocks of text that just don't belong. This is an example on the right that looks structured well. I definitely believe in bullet points instead of long block text. So if you can summarize what you did in a certain amount of bullet points, that's a huge win for you. Always triple check your grammar. Always make sure your grammar is up to date and perfect. Have someone triple check it. Have someone read it over. I know it could be embarrassing for someone to read it and be like, oh, maybe I don't want them to judge me or stuff, but do it. It goes a long way. We notice you need to have consistency throughout the whole thing. If you are leaving a period after every bullet point should have a period at the end of it. You need to be consistent with your tense. So if it's all in present tense, if it's all in past tense, it needs to be the same. I know there's this huge misconception of how long a resume should be and that you need to have it on one page. That's not entirely true. Go to 2 pages. If you have enough info that is tailored to the job you're applying for, put it on. We would much rather see it than it be omitted on your resume, and then we have to do digging and asking and talking to you about it. If we see it there, you stand out more as a as an applicant, and it's very good. So don't be afraid to go to 2 pages. Just make sure you don't like exaggerate your length, because there is a point where it's too long, but 2 pages is fine. Make sure you're using quantitative metrics on your resume. So we want to see detailed numbers. Like, for example, if you're in a sales role, we want to see how many, sales calls you made, or how many sales you closed, things like that. So it creates a higher value of just saying like, I did this. So if you show numbers and show detail of what you did, it makes your resume stand out a lot more. Always use active verbs when writing it. So it's not just saying like, I did this, I managed this. Like, think of a way to show almost like an assertiveness, like a proactiveness to what you were doing at your job by using active verbs. And there's tons of lists online. If you just Google active verbs for resumes, there's tons and tons of lists that you can use. But I will say, don't just, I'm not sure how many people have seen Friends, but when Joey finds out what a thesaurus is and he starts just using random words that work, make sure the active verbs you're picking work towards your resume. So they're just not just random words. I will say, nowadays, if you just put that Microsoft Office, depending on what the job you're applying for, it's almost assumed that you should know how to do that. So when you're putting your skills and abilities on your resume, make sure you list all the different software applications you have. So if you know Salesforce, if you know Paycom, if you know all these different sort of softwares that you've been working with, Adobe, that's more important than just saying, I know how to use Microsoft Office. And then, like I said, don't be afraid to go to 2 pages. We can go to the next page now. Awesome. So a huge don't, leaving a large gap on your resume. So let's say your most recent job, 2018 to 2020, and then from 2015 to 2018, there is a gap in your resume, but that is because maybe you went to school or you had to take time off to tend to your family. Put a little blurb there in parentheses. We don't want to kind of just guess. It might seem like if we're looking at this resume and there's this huge 3 to 5 year gap on there, it might look like, oh, maybe this person was just sitting on the couch for like 5 years. And I'm sure that's not the case for probably 99% of people. So put a little blurb of what you were doing, saying like, I went and got my MBA. I went back to school for this. I, had to stay home. My family was sick or something like that. So we just know that you weren't just kind of, even if you did volunteer stuff, put that in there too. Like if you were like at school but doing volunteer stuff, just put a little sentence like, I volunteered at so-and-so nonprofit, kind of thing. Huge thing that I've been seeing a lot is photos on resumes. We don't need your photo on the resume. That's supposed to be your most professional, lettering of what we can see of your experience. Leave the photo to your LinkedIn profile, make your headshot stand out there, but it doesn't need to be on your resume. Just having your name, where to contact you. You can leave a link to your LinkedIn profile, and that we can then search from there. So yeah, no photos on resumes. Another thing I want to talk about is inappropriate colors. I have seen backgrounds of green, light blue. There's no need to have like a very like colorful resume. It should be professional. It can be perfectly fine with a white background and black or blue ink text, and just don't go crazy with it. I know you want to be creative with your resume, but there is a difference between obnoxious and professional. And sometimes when you get too creative, you get a little obnoxious and it doesn't look as nice. And then this is a personal pet peeve of mine. Don't write a like paragraph summary of all your experience. Maybe you have, 20 plus years in the workforce, and you just don't want to take the time to summarize every job you've had. So you write a huge paragraph in the beginning. That doesn't look nice on a resume. It is too wordy, and it doesn't catch the eye of the interviewer, the recruiter, because it's just this long text of dialogue. And then what they do underneath it is they put their tenure of every single job underneath. You want to put the experience that matches that job. So if you worked at so-and-so organization here, you should put everything you did at that organization, and so on and so on. Don't feel like you have to go all the 20 years. Put what's most relevant to the job you're applying for. So if everything you're doing most recently is relevant, but then you had a job maybe 10 years ago that was relevant, you could put that at the end too. a good rule of thumb when it comes to what to put on your resume is the jobs you had past 5 to 7 years. So if you've had one job in the 5 years, you can just put that on. If you've had 3 jobs in the past 7 years, you can put those 3 jobs on. That kind of helps limit the length for when, so it doesn't get too extensive and too wordy. Another thing on cover letters, we don't want to see a one-page big block text of dialogue. We want to see a good, concise letter to the recruiter, to the organization, kind of saying like why you're a great fit for this organization, why you believe you would fit culturally, what makes you personally stand out amongst the rest, and just a summary of like your background, where to contact you, how to reach you, things like that. So sometimes we will see kind of unnecessary personal notes of their background that don't really pertain to the job, but it's just kind of curious of like, oh, like this is who I am. And it's just kind of like a random thought that doesn't really fit with the job they're applying for. So just be sure to have a very direct cover letter, and no need for it to go to like 1 or 2 pages. Like a nice half to what, like 3/4 page, that's the sweet spot. Awesome. So building your LinkedIn profile, as you can see here, there's a way to have a picture on your LinkedIn profile. It needs to be a professional, high quality shot. If you can't get a high quality photo, that's fine. Just make sure you're looking professional in it. So tie, or even just a collared shirt, a nice blouse, things like that, to kind of just make it look like you're ready to go into the office. No fun pictures, no like Hawaiian shirts and things like that. No pictures of you on the lake, just a nice, professional headshot. One thing that I can't stress enough is having your experience match on your resume. So if you have, let's say, 4 jobs on your LinkedIn profile, you better have those same 4 jobs on your resume, and vice versa. If you have 5 jobs on your resume and only 4 on your LinkedIn, it kind of looks like you're hiding something for some reason. And that's not the best thing to do. So make sure they match with the jobs you have there. It's okay if you want to omit jobs you've had in years and years past, but make sure they're aligned in that way, so it looks like you're organized and you know like what experience best suits you and the most recent experience for you. Awesome. And then another thing that I see a lot of people do is they just copy and paste their resume onto their LinkedIn profile. So they will have their LinkedIn, and then they'll copy all the bullet points they had for that job and put it underneath. That gets a little long on the profile. So what I would recommend is having like a 2 to 3 sentence kind of blurb of what you achieved there, what was your main job duties there, to kind of summarize your experience at that job. So it kind of gives us a good sense of what you're looking for. And then also make sure your skills and expertise is constantly up to date, to kind of put it in the perspective of the recruiter, how we search for people, how we find these new applicants. We create different searches, whether it's a Boolean or the automated search in LinkedIn, and we look for keywords on people's profiles. So if you have, like, let's say we're looking for someone with Salesforce and you forget to put that on your profile, but everything else on there is good and you'd be a perfect match for this, you might not come up because you forgot to admit Salesforce on your skills and expertise section. So that's kind of how we search for things. We look for keywords and stuff. So you want to make sure it's the skills and expertise section is up to date so we can pull the necessary information. And then one thing I also see a lot, it's a quick fix. If you go into your LinkedIn profile, you could edit your URL, and what you will see, probably if you haven't done it yet, it's this long URL that kind of just looks like a very wordy URL, like most typical URLs, but you could edit it so it's just kind of your name or some variation of your name. So like, for example, mine is what it looks in the little box right there, and where that last // it just says Sean Bustamante. That just kind of limits it. And so it looks nicer on your resume, and it looks nicer like if you put on your cover letter, it's just this nice little URL that you can see instead of this long texty URL. Awesome. And so now I want to move on to the interview environment. So as probably most of you know, there's not going to be too many face-to-face interviews happening right now. So it's very important to have a good, quiet, to yourself interview environment. So whether that's, finding a little room in your house, apartment, taking it from the car, that's okay too, but just be very transparent if you are driving and you're in the car. So recruiters and interviewers can expect that there will be background noise. It's better to tell us beforehand as opposed to us kind of, calling and then not being really able to hear you and kind of wondering why. It kind of eats into your interviewing time. But be sure you have a very clean environment. Make sure your background looks very nice. Like make your bed, put away clothes, make sure there's no like garbage just hanging out. There's no dirty clothes on the floor. If you don't feel confident in having a nice background, I know Zoom offers a lot of like backgrounds that you can just preload and it will go behind you. I'm sure some of you have seen that already, but be sure you have a very clean, quiet environment. I know sometimes you can be in the middle of a call and maybe your neighbor's gardeners come or something like that. Just, set it up as best you can so it doesn't seem like you were unprepared. So having a clean environment shows your preparedness, shows that you're taking this seriously. Additionally, I think it's on the next slide. Make sure you're dressing professionally for the face-to-face interview. That means tops and bottoms. I know typically you're only going to see the top, but you never know. You might get up to grab a paper. You might do this. Put professional bottoms on too. It also kind of makes you feel more prepared and more confident in the interview, like you're dressing for the job you want to have. And so definitely full dress for face-to-face interviews. Sometimes you'll be able to gauge the level of professionalism with the organization you're interviewing for. And they might even tell you before, like, hey, no need for a suit and tie, dress kind of casually. We're going to be in t-shirts, I would still recommend wearing a nice casual sweater or something like that. So it looks like you're not at their level and you're taking this more seriously and you want to be more professional than them. Additionally, make sure you have the correct software installed on your computer. The last thing we want is we have a half-hour block scheduled for an applicant, only to when we get into like the Zoom call or the Google Hangouts call and the candidate doesn't have the software installed and we're waiting 15 minutes, 20 minutes for them to get it installed and get it up. And then that half hour then turns into a quick 10-minute call. It's not fair to the interviewer and it's not fair to the interviewee. So make sure you have your software correctly installed. Give it a test run before, maybe, call a family member, call a friend, just be like, hey, I want to make sure this is working. I have an interview tomorrow morning. It's very important just to make sure there's no hiccups. And if there is a hiccup the day before, be like, hey, for some reason, like I can't get sound out of my computer. I don't know if I can do a video call. Make sure you tell the recruiter right away. The recruiter, that whoever you're interviewing with, notify them ASAP as opposed to 10 minutes before the interview. It will give us a chance to readjust, reschedule, whatever we need to do on our end. But it shows a level of professionalism and urgency and transparency if there's a issue that arises. Awesome. So the next slide. So the next thing I want to go over is the STAR method. This is a way to structure your answers when an interviewer asks you a question. And so with the STAR, and I left a link from Indeed that goes way more in depth, and everyone will get this PowerPoint afterwards so you can examine it afterwards. But to kind of summarize it really quick, what it is like I said, it's a direct way to answer interviewers' questions to kind of make it concise and to the point. So it stands for situation. You want to describe the situation that was at hand for you. The task describes the responsibility that was assigned to you. And then the action is what you did, the specific actions you took to complete that task. And the result is obviously what the outcome of the situation was. So one example I would use when I would interview is when I was a recruiter at Aerotech, I had a client who, 6 o'clock, everyone's leaving the office, calls us and say, hey, we need 4 forklift drivers to start tomorrow. And we're unprepared. Half the office is gone. We need to get this done because they're one of our clients. And so the task that was assigned to me was I had to start recruiting for 4 people right away. And so the action I took to it is, first, I looked through my own internal network to see if I had any forklift candidates who were ready to go to work the next day, who wanted to work at that job. And then on top of that, I also took actions by notifying my fellow recruiters, being like, hey, can anyone help me with this? We have an urgent deadline by tomorrow morning. We need to get these people ASAP so they can start tomorrow. And so the result of it was we were able to find 2 people ready to start for the next day. We called the client, we let them know like, hey, so-and-so is going to be starting tomorrow. they're prepared, they're ready to go. Unfortunately, we couldn't get you all four. We're going to be working on the first two right away. And so that's kind of what the result was of the situation. So it's a quick way to kind of eliminate fluff, eliminate the long ums, the long pauses and stuff, to get to the point of what your answer is. The last thing a recruiter or an interviewer wants to hear is a 20-minute answer where only 30 seconds of that 20-minute answer was important. So it's a great way to structure your answers to the interviewers. Awesome. So now we're going to go over some things interviewers, recruiters appreciate and some of their pet peeves. Preparedness is huge. Doing your proper research for organizations. I know a lot of people here are from nonprofits. So if you're interviewing for an organization, look them up on GuideStar. Look up their 990. Do your due diligence on their website. Look at their staff. Look at what their programs are. Get a good understanding of who they are, so you can feel prepared when you're going into the interview, and they will notice that right away. If you bring up specific facts from their organization, it's going to really stand out and kind of put you above the rest because of how prepared you were. And then transparency, I've kind of touched on it throughout this PowerPoint. Be transparent with us. If you're interviewing at multiple places, we'd rather you tell us that, hey, like, I'm interviewing with you, but I'm also interviewing with so-and-so. And so you don't even have to tell us. Just say, like, I'm interviewing at 2 other places. It kind of gives us more of a sense of urgency. Like, oh man, if we really like this person, we need to, go through the process. We need to show them why we are the best organization. So it kind of puts a little more pressure on the organization, and it allows us to have a good relationship with the candidate. So maybe like, here's a situation where, like, maybe an organization really liked a candidate, but then they went with another offer because they thought that was just more in line what they were looking for. And then that offer, for whatever reason, didn't work out, especially in these times. If you burn that bridge with that previous organization, you have no chance of ever working in there. But if you had a good relationship with them, you could even say, like, hey, I don't know if you're still looking for this position. My offer didn't work out because it's so and so reason. It would at least give us an opportunity to be like, oh, let's revisit your application, kind of thing. Also, knowing what's on your resume. There's a lot of times when I'm looking at a resume and I'll ask a candidate a question that's on their resume and they have no idea what I'm talking about. If you put something on your resume, the recruiter, the interviewer, they're assuming that you know that job function to the point, and you could speak on it. You would have no issues with it. So make sure there's, like, no lies, no extra fluff on your resume. If you don't know how to do something, if you're not confident that you could describe that you know how to do a specific job function, don't put it on your resume, because you'll get found out very easily. Also, to be asking very good questions, that goes a long way. When it's your time to ask questions to the organization, that's your time to interview them. Not every job is you're not supposed to feel like every job is like, oh, I really hope they like me. You should go into thinking like, I want to like them. And that's a great time to be asking good questions. You want to make sure that, they're on top of their organization, their stuff, their knowledge, and that they're prepared on their end. So when you go into that organization, you don't feel like you're lost. You can even ask questions about their culture. Like, one thing I would always like asking when I was interviewing is like, oh, what's your favorite part of this job? What's your least favorite part of the job? And you kind of find out like what are like huge pros and huge cons. But I will say, if you do ask that, most of the pros is people will say the people. So it's very important to kind of listen to the cons. Also, timely communication. If we email you on Monday saying like, hey, we have an interview slot for you, Friday at 10:30 a.m. Does this work for you? And we don't hear back until Friday at 10 o'clock saying like, I can do this. Like that's just way too long of a time to go by. Even try to respond within the first 24 hours, because then that will help, us properly schedule. Maybe there's other candidates, there's different meetings that are internally that come up on our end that we need to schedule around. So have timely communication, even if it's just like, hey, I heard your message, let me check my schedule, I will get back to you in the morning. It goes a long way. It shows that you're prepared. It shows that you're interested. It shows that you have a sense of urgency, and it's just important. Having concise info both on your resume and when you're answering questions. The last thing we want to see is, we don't want to dig through a lot of fluff, whether it's when you're answering a question or on your resume, to get to the meat. We want to know what the point is you're trying to make. as direct as possible, as clearly as possible, so we're not losing focus on all this like stuff that doesn't matter. We just want to hear what's the most important. Awesome. Next. And then, so these are the pet peeves, kind of like what I touched on preparedness, not doing your proper research beforehand. So if you're just going in like, oh yeah, like I was notified about this job, it sounded interesting. Like, why did it sound interesting? What drew you to that specific role that made you want to apply there? So making sure you have that proper research. Bad mouthing previous employers. We don't want to say, you know, so-and-so was a jerk to me. I don't like that person. They suck, blah, 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 things like that. If things didn't end amicably at a previous organization, there's a way you can word around that so you're not throwing anyone under the bus. You can say like, hey, I was there for 2 years. It was going great, but then management made decisions that I didn't agree with, and now I'm looking for a new opportunity. You don't want to throw them under the bus. You don't want to make them feel, you don't want the new people you're interviewing with feel like, you know, you're like a troublemaker almost, if that makes sense. Awesome. I touched on this earlier, but having gaps in your resume, make sure you just fill in whatever that gap is. And when I talk about gaps, it's like year-long gaps. If there's like a 2-month gap, there's no need for you to fill in something saying like, oh, I was on the job hunt. I'm talking about like the 2, 3, 5-year gaps. Those are the gaps you kind of need to fill in. Having a lack of transparency, not being honest with the interviewers and the recruiters, that's a huge pet peeve. If you say, you know, you can interview at this time, and then we set everything up, and then, you know, you say, oh, sorry, I had something come up, like that doesn't bode well with us. Like I also said earlier, not having questions prepared to ask. Make sure you have some good questions that are prepared to ask towards the end, or when they allow questions to be asked. Try to think of some beforehand before you're interviewing. If you have a notebook, have them written in your notes so you know you're going to ask them. A huge pet peeve is having your voicemail not set up. If we're trying to get a hold of you to set up an interview, the last thing we want to do is, you know, call, and then we get the automated message of, oh, so-and-so has not set up their voicemail, and then the beep. We want to make sure we're getting our message along to say, hey, we are interested in you, and we want to talk to you. We want to get to know you. We want to interview you. So have your voicemail set up. Long-winded answers. This is just something about that I said earlier about the fluff. We want to eliminate the fluff. We want to get rid of the fluff. We want to have to the point answers. Awesome. And then the next thing is avoiding questions. This is a huge pet peeve. If we ask you a question and you don't know the answer, there's lots of times we see candidates and applicants kind of dance around the question and talk about other things they know how to do, and then avoid the whole question we're asking you to. If you don't know the question, it honestly goes a lot further saying like, hey, you know, I didn't really do much of this at my last job, but it's something that I've always wanted to get into. It's always something I wanted to learn, always something I wanted to grow and expand on. I think if I had the proper mentor, I can definitely like grow and be like a outstanding professional in this category. Something like that to kind of show that you're taking this challenge head on, and you're not scared of it. You're not avoiding it. You're not trying to hide from it. Also, a huge pet peeve is saying see resume. If you're applying to a job and there's application questions, fill them out. We are asking you to give a personalized answer to that question. If you just put see resume, I know it's really annoying. I know if you're applying to a bunch of jobs, it seems like you're answering the same questions over and over again, but that kind of goes in line with the preparedness and the urgency that we're looking for. If you're taking those seriously, we know you're taking this job seriously. If you just put see resume, that almost shows a lack of interest because you didn't even want to try to answer these questions. Minimizing the and similar words. I know I even have a bad habit of it. I'm sure I've said it a dozen times during this webinar, but take a deep breath, take a pause, get your train of thought going instead of just like having the long It just kind of makes you seem a little unorganized and like nervous and unconfident. Be confident in yourself. So definitely minimize the words. Also know what your salary range is, know your worth. If you go into a job thinking, you know, it pays so-and-so, and then it's a significantly less amount, that's probably not the job for you. If you get that job, you're going to feel undervalued. You're going to feel that it's just not for you. So know your salary range, know what you're going into. Awesome. Then the next slide. Awesome. So this is just one of the last couple slides of where to find new opportunities. So you can go on LinkedIn, you can go on Indeed, you can go on Monster. There's also ZipRecruiter. And then for nonprofit jobs, you can go to Idealist. You can subscribe to the mailing list of Dan's list that he will post jobs that you can apply for. And then also our website, we get countless jobs that we are uploading, updating on our website. So feel free to check out our website too. I know it's a little self-promotion, but trust me, we have good jobs. We work with good clients. We work with good organizations. So if you're ever in need to look for a job, look on our website. Awesome. And then the last slide is just some tips about yourself. Be confident in yourself. Know your worth. Know what you're really looking for. And if you're nervous, practice with someone. There's nothing wrong with, calling a friend and be like, hey, can you give me some sample interview questions? I just don't feel too prepared for tomorrow. Do it. There's no harm in that. You can just do it for 15 minutes. It kind of gives you an understanding of what you want to say, what you want to accomplish in the interview tomorrow. So it's very important. And like I said, be confident, know your worth, and know what you're really looking for. Awesome. And so I think now is some Q&A.
All right, great. We've got a good bit of questions. Russia, I hope I said your name correctly. You asked first, how are 3-page CVs perceived?
If it's on the third page, that's okay. If it's like 2.25, 2.5, that's fine. If you go the full third, see where you can cut it down. But three pages, that's fine if you go on to there. Just do your best to make it concise. But yeah.
Great. All right. Anonymous asks, when you are only choosing relevant positions after years of experience, you might have gaps between, example, there were a few years of irrelevant jobs between 2 that were relevant. Would you add a blurb to explain the gap? How would you balance that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if I understand right, let's say you have your most recent was relevant, then your 2 before that were unrelevant, and then you had a relevant job before those 2. I would just you can say like, I worked at so and so organization and put like a small blurb, or you can actually have a detailed, because maybe some of it is important to the job you still are applying for and you might not just realize it. But I get what you mean. You want to limit what you have on there. You want it to seem concise. I think either way is fine, but you just need to be like confident in what you're doing. So if you have a blurb, make sure it's a very professional blurb saying like, hey, I worked at this job for this amount of time doing this, this, and this. And you can do it for both those 2 irrelevant jobs. And then we could ask like, hey, like, can you expand on that a little bit more? We might be interested in what you did there, kind of thing. Hopefully that answers it. If not, I can try to go into more detail.
Great. Hal asks, one recruiter has said never to leave off jobs that you've had, but to simply list the employer and dates if the jobs are 10 plus years back. Do you agree or disagree?
I kind of disagree. That's me personally. I know there are recruiters out there who just like to see everything. But I think for the majority, it's unnecessary. If it's 10 plus years back, like that's a lot of years. Unless the case, I will say, if you have let's call it your template, a resume that you have every time that you tailor to a specific job, I would leave those 10 plus years job off if it's extremely irrelevant. If it's relevant, put like 1 or 2 on. And what might happen is you might send your resume to a recruiter and be like, hey, can you expand on these 10 plus years? And that's when you can go back and expand on a little bit. But for a generic template, I think some of the stuff is too far gone from what you're looking for currently.
All right. Rashi asks, I'm a Canadian. I graduated a year ago with an MPA from Harvard. Is it worth applying to positions in the US, or are recruiters hesitant about looking at non-American employees?
I would say always apply. What's the worst that can happen? A no. I know it's scary and stuff. Always apply though. You never know. One might stick. Your dream job might stick. Always apply. It seems like you're a well-educated person, so I'm sure they'll be interested in that. So I would say always apply. There's no harm in applying other than taking maybe at most 20 minutes out of your day. So always apply.
All right. Anonymous asks what they can do when recruiters, they've gotten feedback that they're intimidating.
Yeah, I think that that's what it comes to the practicing. If you want to practice with a friend, be like, "Hey, I've gotten feedback that I'm intimidating. Can you tell me kind of in my dialogue while I'm doing?" And it might be something that you just have a loud projecting voice. I know, like personally, my dad has a very loud projecting voice, and then when I was a kid, my friends always thought he was angry at me because he just had this loud projecting voice and he could just be talking. So sometimes it's just learning how to practice and making sure like you're not coming off that way. And so that's what I would recommend. And you can even preface it beforehand, like be like, "Hey," and like make like a light joke to kind of lighten up the mood and be like, "Hey, just to let you know, I have been told I'm a little intimidating, but I'm a nice guy, I'm a nice person." Something like that to kind of like ease up the mood.
All right, great. What do you do on your resume if your most relevant and most recent experience are not the same?
Still put your most recent and put your most relevant. Uh, if especially if you've had a lot, like your most recent job is one of your longer tenure jobs, put it on. Tenure is something that recruiters and interviewers look for and appreciate. If we see that you've been at a place for 5 years, there's a reason why you've been there for 5 years. That kind of shows that you're a good employee. So put it on if your most recent's there. I think it's very important to put your most recent. And then if you're filling out application questions, if you're filling out things, touch on what your most relevant is and be like, at so and so organization, I was responsible for this budget, for running this program, for doing this. That's kind of where you highlight that portion of your resume.
Great. Resume question from Anne. For someone with lots of work experience, do you recommend keeping on jobs that were earlier in the career, like jobs outside of college and grad school, or just leave it to the last 10 years?
So yeah, I understand what you mean. You want to limit the fluff, you want to make it concise and stuff. So I would look at what your most recent jobs between the last 5 and 7 years, and start there. So whatever your most recent job is, start there and then go down. And then once you see that your resume might be getting to that like 2 page mark, put a stop point there. If it's a relevant job, put it on there, and you can explain like, "Oh, I've also had some other jobs prior."
Great. She also asks about resume templates. What is the best way to do the blocking of your resume in terms of communication hierarchy? Where should personal, educational, professional, how should that information flow? Or what is the best way?
Yeah, for me personally, I know a lot of people are different. I know some people like the education first, some people like it last. Me personally, I do like the education last. So what I like to see is I like to see the name on the top, where to contact you, so phone number, email, LinkedIn profile. If you have a personal website, you can put that there too. But then right after that, that's where I want to see the professional experience. So your most recent job, the job, and all that, all the information there. And then at the end, put education, the different maybe certificates you've had, skills and expertise, programs that you've used after your experience. That's the format I like to see.
Great. All right. Carol says, I have 30 years of experience, but no bachelor's degree, an AA degree only. How can I get through the door when they say bachelor is required?
Yeah, that's difficult. And that's difficult for one reason is because a lot of jobs, when you're applying to them, you're applying to an applicant tracking system, and so they will have a specific criteria, and that's saying like, "Oh, we are looking for someone with a bachelor's degree," and if the system doesn't pick that up on the scan through, it might reject that right away, and so that's difficult. So one way I would do it is if you can find who like the recruiter is, like via LinkedIn, you can send them a personalized message being like, "Hey, I think this job is a perfect fit for me. I I know it requires a bachelor, but I have 30 plus years experience in this field, and I think I could be a huge asset to that." They have the power to move you along. So just be willing to do a little research to find out who you're interviewing with, who maybe like if you can send them a LinkedIn message, like there's no harm in that. Like I said earlier, there's no harm in applying. The worst that can happen is a no, and you just have to keep climbing that mountain. And I know it's a struggle sometimes, but the worst thing that can happen is a no. And I know everyone here has probably heard no many, many times.
All right, great. And Sean, you touched on the ATS's scanning abilities. Can you expand on that and kind of let people know what they should do with their resumes, since we do have that kind of AI aspect in the...
Yeah. So basically, when it comes to an ATS system, there's a lot of different things that it looks for. If there's a job that's set up, there's specific like criteria that it looks for on the resume. And so that's why I tell you, like, you have to have those keywords. If like the job is looking for someone with Salesforce, I know I keep using the Salesforce example, but whatever specific program it is, put that on your resume, because then the ATS system will pull it and will be able to see it. So that's why it's sometimes difficult to get by it. But it's not, if you have your resume structured in a good way, you have it very detailed, it will be able to go by it.
Great. Regarding salary ranges, is it appropriate to ask what the salary range of a job is before you answer their question about the salary range, or is there a way to kind of finagle your way around it?
No, you can ask. There shouldn't, if they put like a negative mark on you, that's on them. There's no harm in asking like what's the salary range, because like I said earlier, if you're applying for the job and then it's significantly lower than what you're looking for, ultimately you're going to be unhappy working there, because you're going to feel undervalued after a certain amount of time. And so it's very important to know what you're getting into, what you're looking for. And when you ask for a salary range, they might be hesitant and be like, hey, like, this is kind of what they're looking for, but we also pay based on experience. So that's an answer you might get, but there's no harm in that.
Great. All right. Well, I know we've gone over time a little bit and you've got a lot of questions, but we are going to share this PowerPoint, and you'll get these questions that have been answered too. We're more than happy to answer questions via email. Sean, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I will have, oh, I thought my email was on this. If you still have a couple questions, I can answer them via email for the rest of the day. But on top of that, we are providing a coaching service. So if you want to have a longer one-on-one session with me or one of the other professionals here at Envision, we would love to sit down with you guys, kind of go over your resume, kind of do some interview prep for you. So if you want to take a look at our website, we will be having one-on-one coaching sessions when it comes to job preparedness, job interviewing stuff.
Great. All right, everyone. We will be sending out an email with this webinar and information, answering the questions that are on the screen. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email Sean, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much, everyone.